Okay, everyone, welcome back. I hope you had a nice coffee break. Let's continue with the next presentation session. I would like to welcome up 3 PhD candidates, Marizia Wilson, Messia Iomo, and Mohamed Samkunde, to present. And you will present your new projects under the Engage program, which means welcome up, and engendering agribusiness entrepreneurship, which is a joint program between the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania and the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. Do you want to say?
Okay. Morning, everyone. I'm Marizia Wilson. Has been introduced from University of Dar es Salaam and Swedish University of Agricultural Science, and my studies on gender and rural entrepreneurship in agricultural value chain. And I'm looking on citrus fruit value chain actors in one of the region in Tanzania known as Tanga. And on the background picture, that's me, my husband and my brother in one of our family citrus fruit farm. You can now understand why I'm interested in citrus fruits. And as for most of developing countries, as it has been said, agriculture is the mainstay of Tanzania economy, as approximately 80% of the population depends on small-scale agriculture for their livelihood. And the labor force is women-intensive, as women comprises more, like 54% of the labor force employed in the agricultural sector. As the title suggests, my focus is citrus fruit in Tanga. Why Tanga? Because Tanga region is the leading citrus fruit producer in Tanzania, with the productivity of about 22.41 ton per hectare of citrus fruit. But the interest of what attracted me in Tanga, which this is the map of Tanzania and the neighboring country, and the Tanga region is here across the Indian Ocean, and here is Dar es Salaam, the main city, and Dodoma and other region. What attracted me in Tanga is that despite that citrus fruit production is among the core economic activities, but women participation, Costas has spoken about gender issue. The women participation in citrus fruit value chain is very minimal. Like, despite the opportunities which are perceived to be in the citrus fruit value chain, but women do not take part in the value chain. So I developed an interest to understand why women are not participating in the citrus fruit value chain. Then, drawing from literatures on gender and entrepreneurship, I came to understand that one of the key factors which hinder women participation in the value chain are the gender norms and practices in the specific context. But some other literature also suggests that entrepreneurial processes or entrepreneurship, which can be engaged in the value chain, can assist these women of the particular context to challenge the structures of the value chain, which are male-dominated. So if women can engage in entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial processes within value chain and come up with the innovative ways, then they can challenge the barriers which have gendered positioned them in the value chain. So basing on these two propositions and the observed minimal participation, I developed the objective of my studies. So generally, the aim of my study is to explore and analyze the impact of gender norms and practices on women participation in citrus fruit value chain and the resulting counter solution of entrepreneurial processes. And specifically, I'll be looking at the first objective will be to assess the gendered participation in citrus fruit, like the typology of women in the citrus fruit. Where do women who are the women in the value chain and what are they doing? Then I'll explore how the prevailing gender norms and practices determine the position of the women along the chain. The position occupied along the chain by women, how are they related to the gender norms? Like if more are in the production, are there gendered factors placing them there, or if they are in a certain node, what are the relationship between the position and the gender. Then I'll analyze how women position along the chain, faring in relation to men in terms of the costing card, benefit received as the received from participation along the chain. Like how now do women compared it to men faring in terms of the costing card, benefit derived, the position, because literature suggests that most of women take part in the low-paying nodes of the value chain. So I'm going to analyze that too. And last, the last objective is to develop the understanding on how women actors working with citrus fruit engagement in entrepreneurial processes challenge the existing structure in the value chain. Like how now do those women who engage in entrepreneurial activities can challenge the structures? Like how do they provoke the existing structure? How is entrepreneurship developing the agents or increase the women agents to participate and challenge the patriarchal in the system? By the way, I'll take into account other contextual issues such as gender, ethnicity, and other social norms and practices, because these factors, apart from gender, affect, because there will always be a difference between youth decision on entrepreneurship and adult decision. So age also matter. That's why we are here as youth, because we differ in decision making. So in summary, because we have only a few minutes, this will be my study, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for this platform. My name is Mohamed Semkunde from the University of Dar es Salaam. I'm doing my PhD under Engage program, which is funded by SIDA. My topic is the agency of women rice producer groups on rural entrepreneurship processes for market access in Tanzania. In the background, I start looking at the location, population, economy, and gender. So Tanzania is located in eastern part of Africa. It is bordered by Kenya to the north, Kenya and Uganda, Indian Ocean to the east, Mozambique and Malawi south, Republic Democracy of Congo, Zambia, Rwanda, and Burundi to the west. It is approximately having a population of 45 million, in which 51% is female, while the rest is male. Agriculture is the mainstay of the economy. It employs for more than 50% of the population, and in the rural areas, it employs for more than 80%. And it is rural-based kind of agriculture. Rice is the second important food crop which is cultivated in Tanzania. It is mostly used as a food crop for the people of urban, and for the people of the rural areas, they use it as a commercial crop and food as well. Women are the majority in agricultural production. About 54% of the women engage in agriculture production, while the rest is for men. But also this varies across the nodes in the value chain. Going to the production, you find a lot of females taking to nearly 80% of production, while as you move with value addition, the number of women is reduced. However, gender norms, values, practices limit women access to sustainable market, because they get involved in production, a big number of women in production, but when it comes to going to the marketplaces, their role is reduced. And there has been analytical attention towards collective actions for women in most of developing countries, Tanzania being also one of the case study. So, however, there has been a very little explanation of connection between women producer groups or women groups collective actions with entrepreneurship in developing countries. So that being the case, my study has the following objectives. The overall objective of the study is to increase our understanding of the agency of women producer groups in rural entrepreneurship processes for market access in Tanzania. And specifically, this study is going to address the following. The first one is to describe the agents of the producer groups in accessing markets in rural settings of Tanzania, but also the other markets. The second one is to explain how agents works in women producer groups with regard to rural entrepreneurial processes. How will the group facilitate rural entrepreneurial processes in Tanzania? And the last one is to discuss and analyze on how women producer group provoke gender norms, values, and practices. As I said before, we have a lot of gender norms, values, and practices that limit women to access profitable markets. So then this study wants to look on the group. When the women are in groups, is it helpful for them to break through those gender norms and value? And my study is going to use mixed method approach, where survey, interviews, focus group discussion, and observation will be used. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, good morning. Yeah, my name is Messier Ilomo from University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and now I'm based at SLU in Uppsala. And I'm in this PhD project under the Engage project, which is funded by CEDA, as said by my colleagues. In terms of what I do in my PhD project is looking at gender and functional upgrading in the rice value chain. And just to give you in brief, yeah, if we talk of the value chain, of course, we have different actors. Of course, the input supplier, the farmer, the trader, the processor, up to the consumer. But then literature has been very clear in terms of women being or dominating the lower value chain nodes, particularly farming. And there are very few in the higher value chain nodes, including the processing and trading. And it is also clear that, or in the literature, that farming gives them little in terms of the benefits from the value chain. And there's also a lot of literature trying to highlight the challenges or the constraints that women are facing. And then, so the question is, if women are in farming, is there a possibility that they can move to other value chain nodes where they can get better share or higher share, which is an implication on the livelihood of these actors, but not only women but also men, because there are also men that are constrained in terms of moving to the higher value chain nodes. In other words, not just being stuck in the farming and then moving to the other nodes. And some literatures also shows that there is some relationship between gender relation and the ability of women and men actors to participate, but also to move to the higher value chain nodes in the value chain. And of course, in it, there are opportunities in that case for women and men, which might be different, but also challenges. Of course, it's also very clear that women have more challenges in terms of resources, in terms of decision making, and therefore they are constrained in terms of ability to move to the higher value chain nodes. And some studies establish that gender relation influences that movement, but also when they move to the higher value chain nodes, that also has an influence on the gender relation. So is a two-way kind of relationship between the gender relations, including norms and practices, and the functional upgrading. And therefore, so there are a number of questions that this study wants to address, or at least to answer. One is how the rice value chain is organized. And there, of course, we will capture issues including gender roles and responsibilities. And then secondly is what are the functional upgrading opportunities and challenges for women and men actors. And of course, the focus of this study will be done in one area called Kera, which is the area that is important in terms of rice production. And then this study will also try to establish a two-way relationship between gender relations and functional upgrading in the rice value chain. And then lastly, it will also address or try to answer what are the entrepreneurial strategies that are pursued by women and men when they face challenges or constraints as they try to function upgrade along the rice value chain. So, and then in terms of the methodology, this is going to use case study design, where we will consider those that are successful, who have been able to function upgrade, less successful, and those who have failed. So it is going to be more of interviews, observation, and focus group discussion. Thank you.
Once again, I would love to recognize two of our coordinators. We have them here, two of our engaged coordinators. We have Johanna and we have Opira at the back. So those are part of the engaged project where we are three.
Sorry? I have one quick question. Yes.
I was wondering how far ahead are you in your thesis, and when do you think you would have some results?
I can answer that briefly. Right now, I'm developing a proposal, so I'm yet to start the fieldwork, and the fieldwork might start around September this year. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, all three of you. Super interesting projects. Happy to hear how it goes. Next up, did we have any more clarifying questions, by the way? No. Let's move on to next speaker, Yana Perevoshikova. She is the representative for the Russian section of Bipod, which is the global network for young professionals for agricultural development. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the organizers for inviting me, and thank you for your participation and your attention. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Yana Perevoshikova. I'm from St. Petersburg, Russia. Nowadays, I work and live in Italy. I work as export manager for Biolchem company. This is the producer of fertilizers. And as a volunteering project, I'm engaged with Bipod, and I'm a Bipod Russian representative. So today I have this great opportunity to introduce a Bipod network for you. What is Bipod? Bipod is a movement for use, by use, for use, and for agricultural development. Why do we need Bipod and what it is? It is an international network. It is not a formal institution, but a network for Bipodians under 40 years old. We consider these young people, so we have quite optimistic approach to the age because later on we'll see some slides, and today we were talking already that about the aging of population of people involved in agricultural development. So 40 is considered quite young. Then it is a global online and offline communication and discussion platform, and the aim of it is to enable young professionals involved in agricultural development all over the world to communicate and to realize their full potential and contribute towards innovative agricultural development. Why it was created? Because sometimes youth do a lot of work at their organizations, but their opinion is not considered like a very important one, because they're quite inexperienced members. Sometimes they can't give their voice. They don't have enough possibility to participate in a lot of conferences, events. So they used to make some kind of passive performance and silent performance. Therefore, the movement aims to change this situation. At the same time, as it was mentioned today, use key stakeholders for sustainable agriculture and for development of agriculture, because it is made for them. The movement will help is helping Bipodians to participate, to commit, to make a part of different conferences, different debates, and to talk, to make their voice heard. And so it's like to make people involved more, and to make them talk about their opinions and their views. Because also young professionals, they can adopt the current methods which are most commonly used. They have a good computer skills. They can have some innovative opinion. So it's important to also to consider them in agricultural development. This we can see an example of Senegal, but it is valid for all over the world for the aging of agriculture of population in different organizations. And we can see that most of the specialists who work there are from 51 to 60 years old. So in 10 years they will be retired. And then there is a problem that there are not enough youth people involved, so they don't have the possibility to transfer their experience to others to use, and we can lose this valuable experience. This slide I stole from Costa's presentation, and he has already explained this for you about the youth projections. And now I will underline our movement. What the Bipod activities is focused mainly on 4 objectives. First of all, it's to facilitate the exchange of information and knowledge among yours professionals. The professionals are of different disciplines, all around agriculture, but someone like, I don't know, more specialized in marketing, someone in the farmers of different countries. It is international movement, so there is a great possibility to exchange and to share the experience. Then we try to broaden the opportunity for young professionals to contribute to strategic agricultural development policy debates, and it is easier for us when we are the movement and we are in group to present our opinion, to participate in the conferences. We promote agriculture among young people, also by giving them information about the opportunities which are in this sector. We promote and make this major like more attractive for them, like an interesting career path, and to facilitate access to resources and capacity building opportunities, because we organize some programs, and also on regional and on global level to help youth to build up the necessary skills, like entrepreneurial skills, like policy, like public speaking skills, and different others. Here is the use, as I told before, they come from different organizations. It can be universities, private sectors, farmers, NGOs, government agency from different majors. The structure for our organization is the following. The Global Coordination Unit is hosted by GFAR, Global Forum for Agricultural Research, and it is based at FAO headquarters in Rome. And regional offices are based in different institutions, as you see on the map. But this is just also we have like a lot of people participating online. We have different country representatives. In like I represent Russia, there are people who represent Sweden, like Caroline, for example, and different others. And of course, there are a lot of members who participate online, and also some events offline. And we are supported by mainly by SDS and also by Netherlands Minister of Foreign Affairs. We have different partnerships, and also we are looking for expand them. So maybe even today there will be some opportunities for developing and building some partnerships. So this is a bit more concrete about the goals I specified before. When we talk about sharing information, we have a website. We are present in all social networks like LinkedIn, Facebook, regional networks. We have a very useful news bulletin, which talks, which provides information about the opportunities, about the different funding opportunities, research programs which are going on, studying opportunities, and all necessary things for developing your professional profile. There are different blog posts that we published. Nowadays we have 15,000 registered members globally. We participate in different events like Tropentag and other important conferences. The goal, as I told, very important to make the word of youth heard on and to be present on such kind of important events. For example, Worlds in Jakarta 3 conference, we were present as Bipod movement. We promote agriculture among young people by telling, presenting some successful stories, and the guys who presented before, also your stories can be successful stories that can inspire young people to choose this type of major, and so that they can see that there is an opportunity behind. It is not like the sector which is not interesting to anyone. And we have a social media boost camps which broadcast different events. We facilitate access to resource and capacity building opportunities. The needs are region specific, but as I mentioned before, it's like can be grant writing, it can be public speaking, it can be leadership skills. So different skills we try to give opportunity to use to develop them. We had a meeting in Rome in 2015 where the external consultant has evaluated the work of Bipod during 4 years, and we summarized where we are, what we achieved, what is good, and what is bad, what are the things that we can improve. And we realized that we decided to drive towards like more content-based paradigm to improve the what do we want to say. Okay, we have the voice, but what do we want to say? Therefore, we launched some projects like there was a mentoring program launched with support young women and young entrepreneurs and agribusiness. So the experienced people share, the experts of the field, they share their ideas and they support the young entrepreneurs. We make stronger regional programs with a wider impact, and we include more youth in steering committee and in execute committees. So that's briefly the introduction of our network. You're welcome to place any questions and to discuss some opportunities for partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. Do you have any questions for Jana now? Thank you. Nice. Then let's move on. We are having some uploading last minute. We're now happy to welcome Olof Seman, who is a board member of the Swedish East African Chamber of Commerce, SWEACC. You're very welcome. Do you have a speaker already? Yes.
So, just-in-time presentation. So I made some changes during the other speakers. So, Swedish East African Chamber of Commerce is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chamber of commerce, an organization to promote business between Sweden and East Africa. Myself, I have been studying at the Royal Institute of Technology, land surveyor, not lantmästare, but lantmätare. Lantmäteri as my first degree, and then land and water management as my PhD thesis, focusing on water resources and land management. I've been working as a consultant more than 30 years in Africa, from South Africa on the east coast mainly up to Egypt, and my projects involved as a consultant has been focusing on water resources and environment and agriculture, of course. Agriculture needs water, as we all know, from rain-fed to irrigated agriculture. Start with the SWEACC, what we are doing and how to serve our clients or members. So we focus on networking, knowledge development and collaboration, of course. And our vision is to increase the business between Sweden and East Africa, self-explanatory. And our mission is to provide a meeting place. I mean, we're not doing the business, we are facilitators for people to meet. From the East African community, South Sudan, if you look at the map, is now a member of the East African community just recently. Although a rather difficult market to work in. I will show you some projects where I've been there. Yeah, and one of our parties, or several parties, of course, the East African embassies here in Sweden, represented by the Dean, Mr. Tang here, and also, of course, the other embassies represented here for the Nordic countries. Not all of them are present here in Stockholm, but in Norway and in Denmark. So, what we are trying to do is to focus, or we have actually made a survey from our members and what they would like us to do. We are a very small members financed and pro bono board type of organization. So we don't have a very large turnover. So we're not really doing business, but trying to facilitate business, as I said. Members, business development. The members are from large companies like Scania to one-man companies or one-woman companies. And of course, the interaction between the embassies and the Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs and other government organizations. We try to facilitate the contact for our members and the board itself with the various players. And also for internal cooperation, specifically the small companies, they benefit a lot if they can cooperate, not compete. I mean, some of them have similar business models, but I mean, we're a bit poor on that in Sweden if you compare to our Nordic members, to join forces rather than compete on new markets. If you look at the Danes, which we are a bit envious, government bodies and private sector, they always walk hand in hand into new markets. So we see our role to facilitate that also, to be kind of a catalyst between government shops and private business. Yeah, you can read yourself to new channels, to information, and to develop business. And this one is a rather novelty mainly because of expense. There is a European Business Council for Africa and the Middle East. And I will come back to that. That represents about 3,000 companies. And to enter into their network, and this very open network, all information is actually a bit too much. We get daily newsletters on how to sort that information. And that's anything from that connected to, how do you say, omvärldsanalys in English, anyhow, to direct business opportunities. This is how we finance our activities. We have just doubled the fee rates, although not. I don't know, Michael, if you got the new rate there. You should have. I think you got last year's rate. Anyhow, so it's reasonably cheap for an individual and small companies, and for a big company it's also peanut monies. Although important for ourselves to be able to keep up the activities that we aim to. We have a lot of broad kind of business area we try to cover, from energy, tourism, ICT, medtech, health, infrastructure, agriculture, transportation, water and sanitation. How do we manage that with such a small, I mean, the board is 7 people, and we're rather key to catalyst our members. Well, we try to focus on one area at a time, and we try to make clusters. I will go through that. This is what I said before, the actors and the partners we try to cooperate with. Other African embassies, the ESC countries' embassies, of course, other African chambers. There are some 5 or so. SWEACC is the oldest. We're about 5-6 years old, and the largest. Then there is one from North Africa, there is one from East Africa, from West Africa, from Central Africa and South Africa, and one for Ethiopia. Something like that. And of course, we should also aim at not competing, but cooperate. That has been a bit touchy at times, but we are doing our best to get everything together. The Swedish body, the government bodies that are engaged in development cooperation is now kind of focus their own business into a brand name. I don't know if it's properly working yet. That is to be asked maybe to Mr. Olof here. Team Sweden is Business Sweden, SIDA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, etc. And they, at least Ministry of Foreign Affairs, consider us to be members of Team Sweden because we're all promoting business and development cooperation, in, not only in Africa, but all over. There you have EBCAM again. Now, this is our kind of areas we try to move into through various activities, mingles, breakfast meetings, seminars, events, and then to make the focus area a bit more concrete, we are starting to develop clusters where members, a smaller group of members, we're about 200 plus members, but smaller group of members that have a specific interest and can be the driving force outside of the board of developing the business there. So energy coupled to financing, well, everything is coupled to financing, of course. Tourism, we tried to start, there was not very keen interest, very strange. I mean, East Africa is a fantastic, well, like Michael was saying, it's a fantastic country for tourism, or countries for tourism. Not at the time maybe from Burundi and South Sudan, but that is temporary kind of turmoil, hopefully. ICT is developing more rapidly in East Africa than in Sweden. The tools you have, some of the tools that we are now getting in our pockets were developed in Kenya or even Ethiopia has a fantastic coupled to agriculture. When I was there quite recently, I've been living in Ethiopia for some 3 years and in Swaziland, where I was a lecturer at the Faculty of Agriculture at the time, actually, for all water resources subjects. There are 3 banking ladies who developed a sophisticated SMS systems to the farmers. So they get the market, the daily market selling price on the market on an SMS on their phones. Not even iPhones and sophisticated phones, but just small, simple phones. Meaning that since they have 2 days to the market on a donkey or something, well, the price of watermelons are too poor today, so I wait a couple of days until they're not rotten. But so it gives a fantastic possibility, the mobile phones there. Okay, so I have 5 minutes to go. Let's, again, we try to get some cluster committees and focus areas again. And these are the activities again: breakfast meetings, mingles, seminars, cluster activities, urban development, healthcare. We had a big forum on ICT and healthcare with some 70 participants a couple of weeks ago, or 23rd of March. It's a bit more than a month ago, which was considered very successful. We tried to have some member service. And this EBCAM, what I said was 4,000 member companies. And of course, that's very interesting for Swedish export companies, big and small, to have a network that you can use. And the thing is, we get access to the political arena also. And since this is a chamber, the private Swedish companies cannot get access to this EBCAM without our support. So we are the key to get there. Okay, there's some, well, pictures from my own travels. This is mainly from Lake Tanganyika and from Nigeria, where they have the kingdoms there, which is a parallel government, which is very important. You cannot just go through the standard government structure there. This is an example from Rwanda, where I've been working the last 10 years. I did the strategic environmental assessment of their energy sector, which is everything. They go for, of course, everything. They have peat. These are 20 meters deep peat bogs, which are another structure in here in Sweden. So SWEACC, where I used to work, and make both the incineration plant, doubling up the energy production in Rwanda by utilizing peat, production of peat and incineration. They have biogas in Lake Kivu, bordering to DRC, which is geologically old methane, not recent methane. So it's solved in the bottom water. So you just put down a pipe and it bubbles up. You treat the gas and you run it to your generators to generate electricity. Well, there's an engine there also. This is showing some good forestry in Burundi, hydropower, and of course the gorillas you need to take care of there. So hydropower, solar, peat, methane, geothermal, and of course petroleum products as well. Yeah. So again, there is plenty of business opportunities. Silk investments, H&M are investing in Ethiopia, and not only them, IKEA is there. These are some projects that SWEACC was doing. South Sudan, I've been working. Tourism, of course, this is again from Lake Tanganyika. Urban development, the cities are growing like anything. Invest in real estate in the capitals in Africa. You will get, well, twice or three times back in 5 years' time, I'm sure. This is another example. This is not very well-known river. It's the second largest tributary to the Nile, besides the Blue Nile, if you consider Blue Nile to be a tributary. Well, Blue Nile is bigger than the White Nile, so maybe White Nile is a tributary. That can be debated by Kenyans and Ugandans or Burundians. 1 minute to go. This is a study that I was doing the terms of reference for. That's ENTRO, the Eastern Nile Technical Regional Office, which is based in Addis. This is from the Barakubo, and these are the Nile Basin flags. Thank you. Winter, not only hockey, but skiing, one missing also. And this is some maybe not very serious rules to remember, but you can try it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl. Any clarification questions? Short ones? Yes.
Well, if you want my contact details, since I don't have too many business cards, they're just there. iCloud.
Okay, thank you. My name is Innocent Chamisa, currently in Rome with FAO. I was just wondering if you are having any prospects of investing or maybe of partnerships with the Southern African countries. I see you're mainly focused in the East. Are you thinking in the near future of going down south?
Yeah, I mean, what I was trying to say is that we have started to cooperate seriously with the other chambers that has, some of them are very young and have not really formed their business model at all, like the Central and Western and Northern guys. The Southern Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Ethiopian one, they have a good structure, and we have had joint activities. We had an energy and financing activity at the Ethiopian embassy, and this big forum we had with 70 participants, which was co-organized by the Swedish South African Chamber of Commerce. I mean, we cooperate well, and by being a member, just pay the fee, you can get access to these guys also. You can go to our website, which is just SWEACC.se. So have a glance there, and you will see whatever activities we have for the coming few months or for the coming year.
Great. Opera.
Thank you for a nice presentation. I didn't hear a word about corruption in East Africa. And as an East African, I know that corruption in business sectors or business corruption with secrets, contracts, and so forth are numerous, including golden handshakes. I mean, what is your take on that, sir?
Yes, since most of the projects, SWEACC as a big consultancy, they're now 17,000 people. When I left, it was 9,500. We have, of course, a very strict business model, CSR policies and such stuff. And of course, you get confronted almost every day in various ways. Most of the projects a big consultancy wins is by competitive bidding with World Bank financing, not too much SIDA financing today, but it used to be in older times, African Development Bank, etc. And of course some national procurements. World Bank is one of the most strict organizations in the world, I would say, when it comes to corruption. They have their detectives and lawyers coming to your house, scrutinizing your books for the last 10 years or something. If they doubt that there's not any clean business going on. Now, on the client side, it might be a bit difficult at times. If we look at the East African countries, I have the latest experience from Rwanda. It's one of the cleanest countries in Transparency International's listing. In practice, maybe cleaner than Sweden. Ethiopia, where I've lived, is also, I mean, it might be dependent on the government, the strength of the government, where they have very strong presidents or prime ministers that people don't dare to make any monkey business because they will be put away for a time. Well, I mean, it's just to as a private consultant to keep your morale. I mean, it's not. I don't see it as very difficult. If you have any problem, that's why I think Michael brought it up, that the friendliness should not be misunderstood with corruption. If you have a problem in executing a project, or you go out and have a beer with the guys, and you solve it. Try to work in Eastern Europe, where they like to whip consultants because they think they're so much cleverer than the consultant is. So that's my experience, by the way. And even so in the Balkans. A very long answer on a short question. Maybe time is out.
Super. Let's say more discussions to the panel.
Right.
Exactly. So then we move on to, before the panel, move on to the last speaker of this session, Stephen Carr. And Stephen is an independent consultant and will present the Agripreneurship Alliance, a youth-focused approach for food security.
Hi, good morning. I'm the last speaker. That's important to note, okay? So what I'm going to try and do is put a bit of the conversations from our esteemed speakers from early this morning into context, review those a little, as well as talk a little about this thing called the Agripreneurship Alliance. Bit about myself first. I'm English. Actually, I'm a Yorkshireman, which is a big deal. I'm currently living in Switzerland, and my background is young people, community development. So I come from an educational background, but I also have a big interest in agriculture and agribusiness, in part because of family background, as well, amongst other things. And I'm currently working as an independent consultant. And one of the pieces of work that I'm currently involved in is the launch of a very early stage, not-for-profit startup, which we're calling the Agripreneurship Alliance. And I'll touch more about that very soon. So to put some things into context that we've already been discussing, agriculture in Africa. Agriculture in Africa is focused on smallholders. Most of the food production is not by large-scale farms, it's by smallholder farmers. And this employs billions of people around the world. But we also know that many of the farmers themselves are women. And then you enter into the whole debate that's already been talked about the gendered roles within rural economies, about the access to land rights, the access to the profits that come out of selling produce. And we also know that farmers are getting older and older and older by the day. The average age of farmers in Africa, if not around the world, is nearly 60 years. And so what happens next? There are lots of definitions about what young people are. I know Bipod have been talking about it being from 40 down. The major policy positions in Africa are that young people are up to the age of 35. So in terms of the work that I'm doing, that's the kind of age group that we're focusing on. And it's already been mentioned. Young people are making up an increasingly large size of the population in Africa. In fact, Africa is the youngest continent in the world. And you have to look at that as being a risk or an opportunity. And obviously, there's a massive opportunity there for gainful employment, for creation of enterprise, and so on. And 10 million young people join Africa's labour market every year. Many of those go into employment within the formal sector. Some of those are starting up businesses, whether it's micro, small, medium-sized enterprises, and many of them are working on family farms. And so the official statistics, which were mentioned, is that unemployment is officially about 12% in Africa. But obviously, I think the big question mark over the legitimacy of that figure is a good question to ask. And only 16% of young people in Africa have got a wage job. And poverty is still a big issue in Africa. The Sustainable Development Goals, based on the Millennium Goals, have had massive impact on the levels of poverty. But it's still an issue. And many people in Africa are still living below the level of US $2 a day. So there are global challenges that we all face, whether we're in Northern Europe, whether we're in Switzerland like me, or whether we're in Africa. Climate change is huge. Climate change will affect every single one of us, and it will definitely impact on my little boy who's 4. We know that climate change is happening. We know that a 1 degree rise in temperature dramatically reduces yield of agricultural crops. We know that climate change can have impact on poverty because people move. We see issues around competition, increased competition for water resources. We see increased competition for issues like access to pasture land for grazing. And this leads to migration. We've been talking a lot already about the migration of young people from rural to urban areas. It happens in Africa, it happens in the UK, I'm sure it happens in Sweden, where young people, for whatever reason, are saying, my future is not in this little village in the countryside. I want to go to the big city, whether it's Dar es Salaam, whether it's Stockholm, whether it's Geneva. And there is an added element to this migration, which is the idea that people move because of climate change. My communities aren't as profitable, habitable as they used to be, or it can be because of conflict. And there is some work which is suggesting that in Africa, climate change is a leading cause of conflict. Population growth. We forecast by 2050 to have a population in the region of 9 billion people in this world. And after that, 11 billion people. That's a lot of mouths to feed. A lot of people are now saying that our food system, our global food system, is broken. And one of the issues within this is that there's actually enough food developed in the world to feed everybody. but that food is not necessarily in the right place, or it's the wrong sort of food. And so that there are some key factors about food that I wanted to talk about. 1/3 of the food that is produced is wasted. Never actually is used for the purpose that it's intended for. It either doesn't make it to market, it rots in a field, it isn't transported properly, or it's wasted post-consumption. But how much food do we as individuals throw away? We buy too much in the supermarket, we leave it in the fridge, it goes moldy. Or we take too much onto our plates and it gets thrown out. It's all wasted calories. And food losses amount to over 600 billion US a year. And in particular, staples such as fruits, vegetables, cereals, tubers are key foods that we lose. And as you can see, different food crops lose different percentages. I'm going to talk a bit about opportunities, but something I want you to focus on here. I'm sorry, I don't have a pointer. This point here, Sub-Saharan Africa. The vast majority of the food that is wasted is post-production. Post-harvest. It does not get to market. It does not get to be processed. It does not get to a point where value can be added to that product. And so there's an opportunity there, I think. I thought I'd bring in a scientist because I'm not one. Albert Einstein, who was a physicist, not an agriculturalist, said, "In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity." So when we see challenges, we see problems that can be fixed. Is there a chance here, as Michael was saying, that there's opportunities for us to develop business? And when I'm talking about food, as you've probably gathered, I'm not just talking about primary production of foodstuffs. I'm not just talking about growing maize or raising livestock or fruit, or I'm talking about the entire range of food businesses, both on a local and a global level, that impact right through to the food being on somebody's plate and what happens next anyway. Yeah? So there's plenty of opportunities here, not just for young people in Africa, but for people here. There's a huge amount of work happening right now in terms of strategic frameworks in Africa to support youth-focused and youth-driven agripreneurship. And one of the biggest declarations that was made is this thing, and I'm not going to go into details. It was signed off by the African Union Commission in 2014. And it made some very, very ambitious statements about reducing the amount of food that is wasted, about reducing the number of people who are hungry. And when we're talking about hunger in Africa, we're no longer just talking about calorie deficient diets. People don't get enough calories to eat. Increasingly, we're talking about the quality of the diet. So for example, it's just been released today. In a scoping exercise in Malawi, 60% of people are vitamin A deficient. 30% of children are iron deficient. 25%, currently 25% of infant deaths are caused directly by malnutrition. Food is still an issue. It's a live issue here, and it is an issue of life and death. But the potential for value creation is important, because as some have been saying, there's a very vicious cycle in places where hunger leads to food aid, and then people get reliant upon food aid, and that cycle's got to be broken so that food can actually be created locally, both for local consumption but also to enter into the global market for finance. I think I'm the first person to put an SDG sticker up today. It's important, guys. And Sustainable Development Goals are here, and they provide real, clear frameworks for us to justify what we do. And whether that's as part of a business pitch, or whether it's a pitch to a funder, or it's an important framework to remember. And things like no poverty, no hunger, looking after the land, looking after the waters. So the activities that we do have to be sustainable in the long term. I'm really grateful that ITA Youth Agripreneur program's been mentioned. And that program, which is 3 years into running now, and being driven by Evelyn Onwuzi, is really important. And this has developed, the idea from that is where Enable Youth has come from, which, as we know, is a multi-billion US dollar funded project by the African Development Bank to support youth agripreneurs in 25 sub-Saharan states. The role of universities is really important as places for learning, but also places for creation of business, the idea of incubation units. And there's a lot of really good NGOs doing work as well in this area. But one of the things that we've been doing, and I'm talking now about the Agripreneurship Alliance, is we've been doing some work about where are the gaps. So we've been talking to agencies, we've been talking to young people who are part of the Youth Agripreneurs program. And what we've realized is that there is really great training happening in terms of agricultural practices, fish farming, cassava, yam production, and so on. What's not so strong at this moment in time is the business skills training to support that and to support the creation of new businesses. So that's where the Agripreneurship Alliance hopefully comes in. Really early stages here, okay? I kind of feel a bit entrepreneurial at times. We're really small. You're looking at me. We've got a good backer from a business sector corporation. And the idea is to support agripreneurship and these programs that are already happening in Africa with the development of cloud-based resources, focusing on early stage development of people's first business plans, but cloud-based resources and cloud-based training programs that can be embedded into those face-to-face training programs. So we're going to promote and stimulate youth-driven entrepreneurship in agriculture and agribusiness. Remember that whole stretch between startups of primary production through to the final food on a plate. And we've got some aims. We're going to encourage and support young people to be farmers through choice, not necessity. We're going to inspire young agripreneurs to start up businesses. We're going to encourage novel approaches and contribute to local and global security. Now, that's a lot of things for a small, lean, new startup to do. And that's why our partnership of business, universities, and NGO sectors is going to be really important to us. And currently we have about 40 organizations of different types who are saying that they want to be a part of the Agripreneurship Alliance. I should say it's not launched yet. We're on soft launch period. We're just getting our legal side of things sorted out. And we hope to have a harder launch by the end of this year. Thank you for your attention. Are there any questions, or can I sit down? Please.
If you're going to sit down, why don't we invite everyone who has been speaking? Because this is the panel session discussion. So please go ahead. Just a quick few things here, and I asked to the speakers actually. There have been a lot of presentations. I have heard from several people that like to have access to them later on. So those of you who are okay with putting them online, is okay? If there's any restriction, you can send them send the revised version to me. Yeah, that's okay. All the way. Okay. I just want to make you aware of that this part of the workshop, and the whole workshop is actually part of a discussion brief that we're going to write together with Siani and SLU. So we're trying to see the outcomes of this workshop to be reflected in something that people can work with further. So it's not that we just have nice discussions here. We want to take it the next step. Okay, so it's important. Your input really matters. I think it was really nice to see this morning and earlier as well in the presentations. They ran the gamut from perspective in organizations, from the university, people at the university trying to drive knowledge-based interventions, trying to see why people do not get into business. Why are women, disfavored in this sense, and what can we do about it? So we have a university represented. We have networks initiatives, YPART, trying to facilitate interconnectivities between actors in agriculture. We have north-south linkage with SWEACC represented, and an NGO, and there's a whole bunch of NGOs that work on agripreneurship and trying to foster this. And Stephen Carr has been talking about his NGO, and there's a lot of them besides that. It is important to see that, for all of this, we need to have everyone on board. One thing I want to mention here as well, one important thing, being a person at the university, is education. We know that business opportunities may arise, and we can make a quick buck or two by starting businesses. But of course, what we need to move to is a more knowledge-intensive agriculture and more equitable. So how do we develop tool sets for youth to be more engaged in agriculture and to actually probe into their agripreneur and entrepreneurial skills? How do we make calculated risks? So these sort of things we bring to the discussion after lunch, and I really invite you to think about these things. For now, I would like to have you bring up the questions that may have come up during the presentations and ask them. There's a large panel, so hopefully lots of questions. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm Cecilia Nordin van Gansberg from the government's offices. And thank you for very interesting presentations. Just one reflection, I think we in Sweden share many of the problems that we have, as you can see in Africa, is that it's not cool being in rural areas, it's not cool working with agriculture. And you've all discussed things that will apply when people are this age and they have certain education. And if you'd like to make a comment, shouldn't it be that you have to be outside? You, sir, you're living in Dar. I mean,
I live on the savannah as well.
Yeah, okay. No, but just how do we make the areas where agriculture happens to be cool areas? And also we know that urbanization tends to take place in cities who were first established in a place where you could grow your food. So when they expand, they will be expanding on fertile ground. So how do we get young kids to actually think it's cool to be in the countryside and being an entrepreneur, not just a farmer? Thank you.
And by will, anyone?
Yeah, I'll try and answer that. It's okay.
Yeah.
The idea that we have, and is if we can encourage young people to see business opportunities within rural areas, where they can see themselves as being able to create wealth, which is not necessarily, as you say, directly linked to or only directly linked to agricultural production, but is in the entire value chain. Things like marketing, things like extension services, adding value, finance, the whole gamut of activities that support food moving from the soil to the plate, for example. And we believe that if we can encourage people to take that risk, take that chance, you actually start enabling the development of sustainable rural communities. Because if you have people who choose to stay within rural communities, who are able to have a good life within that community, then those people themselves can start demanding better services and be able to contribute to buying those services. And we hope that that idea will then lead to a greater voice for those rural communities so they can engage more with their political representatives, so that they can start arguing for and advocating for better communication links. So we believe that there's a real fundamental role here, and it is a chicken and an egg. It's a case of, can we encourage young people in particular to choose to stay in rural areas, take the chance to find niches where they can create business that can give them a good life, and hopefully that will then lead to the other side. And it is, I'm turning more and more to this idea of people take risks. People don't plan too much, actually find a niche and try it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, learn from that and adapt it and try again at something a bit different. And so I think that idea of the entrepreneurial spirit is really, really important within this.
Thank you. To add something on that, in the field of entrepreneurship, we currently have this emerging branch of entrepreneurship known as rural entrepreneurship, and scholars have tried to differentiate between rural entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship in rural. Like when the investor go to Tandahimba and establish the kesho, that is might be entrepreneurship in rural, but we need to develop youth capacity in rural entrepreneurship. The focus is on looking at opportunities specifically on a particular area and how to creatively combine the resources of a particular areas, because most of the time we forget what we have and we look opportunities somewhere else, and we have a number of opportunities which can be exploited within the areas. So I think one way of making rural area attractive is to turn the eyes of the young generation to the opportunities which can be exploited in a given areas. We have potential, like we have fruits, we have maybe a certain brand of, whether it's cattle or whatever, or fishy or whatever, which is available in a particular area. Then we can maximize on that and capitalize on the resources which we are available. We may start small and attract more. I think that can be another option.
Thank you, Messia. Yeah, just to connect with what my colleagues have said. Yeah, if we think of youth entrepreneurs in agriculture, and we only focus on farming, I think it's not the best thing that youth, for example, in Africa would think of venturing. But then, if we think of involvement of youth in the agriculture, but in the whole value chain, I think then that makes more sense. And that is where, for example, I come with my project, where we have some few cases that have been successful from the rural, have been able to move up the chain, down the chain, in other words, from farming to processing and to trading. So we can learn from these cases in terms of the challenges, the opportunities they face, and those that have also tried and failed. We can also learn from them and have some at least package of insights that can inform other youth in the rural on the benefit of engaging in agriculture. Thanks.
Also, I have some addition here. Looking at the rural populations in Tanzania, for instance, we have a lot of women who are involved in production. So if you empower these women so that they can see the opportunities available close to the areas, and these women stay with their kids around, they can impart this education to their kids, and therefore these kids will be looking at the resources that are close to them because of the influence of the parents. So that's why my study is focusing on the women, empowering the women within their groups. Once they are well knowing the opportunities, the entrepreneurial opportunities, then they can enhance their kids to understand the nature of the environment around them and the opportunities that are around them. And therefore, this will facilitate easier understanding of entrepreneurial opportunities among the kids or the youth around the various villages of the country.
Yeah, your question was how to motivate people to stay. And I see what we have done in Tandahimba then. Since we now are some sort of a center of excellency, where we show how real business is supposed to be done, we have created quite a few startups around us by local people, and they are now becoming real entrepreneurs. And they are now part of the legal system, paying taxes, having companies that are formalized in a real way, so they're not part of the black economy. And that's what we track, because since we are a transparent company, we need to have a receipt, we need to have an invoice. So we turn what used to be an informal market into a formal market. We also, and I think I'm quite a cool guy, by being around there, I think I myself get people to rethink and think this is quite cool. And I see quite a few examples.
Another personal reflection on the similarities between Sweden and African agriculture. My grandfather had 2 hectares horticulture production close to Stockholm here, so the market was close in Bro, which is just, I don't know, 50 kilometers from, not even that, from Stockholm center. My mother, she left at 16, like a youngster at the time, to the challenging Stockholm and married a sea captain. Now, when I look at this piece of land, my grandfather, when there was some misharvest, he cut off a piece of land and sold it to some other guy. So there was a lot of summer houses surrounding the farmland, contributing to the harvesting exercises, of course. So it was a proper African family. 5 families was living on these 2 hectares, intensive cropping. So now what I see, there is not too much farming there. The main piece of land is kind of a moonshine farmer, IT specialists living on the main house, but they're still contributing. They came back. It's also relatives to me. They took over the farm, and there's some sheep there, and they take some apples and so forth. So it's not intensive farming any longer, but it's sustaining one. Well, it's not really sustaining one family, but they're coming back. So maybe that might happen also, that the guys who are leaving, I think many people in Sweden, they go back if they have the opportunities to survive. Another thing reflecting to your discussion was, I don't know if you saw a very interesting television program last week, I suppose. It was called The Last Harvest. Very challenging program. There was a few positive words said. I don't know if it's true or not, but they said that if we manage by changing the agricultural practices to increase the humus in the soil with 3%, we will catch all human carbon generated in the atmosphere. 3%. But to make that happen is a real challenge. I mean, if you look into some very exploited soils where the humus is consumed instead of increasing. But think about it, to put some natural fertilizers, back to the soil instead of chemical fertilizers. That's just fantastic to increase the humus and plow back some organics.
Yeah, I think real briefly, Lana, then we move on.
Yeah, I just wanted to underline the point which Michael raised, that it's very important to show like good examples, successful stories, so then people would see that people can be well-being, they can profit from the business, and they can do a good thing and in the rural areas and have a good lifestyle, and then you make it work. But yeah, that's what also we are doing. One of the objectives of Bipod, to promote agriculture among like youth people.
Hi, hello. During the lectures, it was very highlighted that a lot of farmers are small-scale farmers, but you also have the problem of the multinationals that have big part of the whole food business. So how, as small-scale farmers or small holder producers, can they compete with big corporations?
No, I suddenly understood that I was not supposed to be here. So I felt a little bit embarrassed. But I think that smallholder farmers normally can compete very well. Perhaps not in the big staple foods like wheat, rice, and things like that, but in all niche products, fruits, spices, legumes, groceries. Yeah. So, but they need. They need also to move ahead with using the right seeds, with trying to fertilize, with keeping some of the money for the next season and things like that. And quite basic things that a lot of the farmers don't really understand.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And, you want to comment?
Just a little comment on this. I think what we're missing sometimes is that where the economies of size are, because what you're talking about is economies of size, and very often the economies of size do not lie on the primary production. So these multinationals, what they capture is what happens in between, in processing, in marketing, in research. Okay, so if this is provided somehow, the small producers can capture the value. You see what I mean? So you don't have to integrate necessarily. And I'm not I'm not saying that there are not economies of size in primary production. There are, but sometimes you can't. It's inevitable that you have small farms, and you need to work down the chain to capture that. That's all.
I could say that for me, we had the opportunity to go into farming, to do the cashew, and it would have been more profitable than being in processing actually. But we picked processing because of the land issue, and because of we might have been criticized if we owned the land. With us now, with our factory in Tandaimba, we have seen an increased activity among the cashew farmers because they get paid on time and they get better paid. So, and we have now 3,000 contracted farmers, and some of them didn't take care of their trees before, and they do that in a better way. And we can then transfer our knowledge that we know that the European consumers wants. They need traceability, they need to know that it's safe, they need to know that there is no child labor, and we can then transfer that kind of practices all around.
Thank you very much. Mine was just to add on to the previous question. In the situation, as far as Kenya is concerned, since 2013, we've had a new constitution, which has actually devolved government to 47 regions. And one of the key sectors within that is the agriculture. What has happened as a result of that is that there's more people now staying in those 47 regions than previously. So a lot of people are actually getting involved in agricultural, in agriculture itself and agricultural practices, so to speak. So there's more people now who are based in the regions themselves. Thank you.
Yeah, and as a continuation or rejoinder to the ambassador's comment, the population of Africa is growing at a very fast rate, faster than the economic growth. And then the population is very young. Around 70% of the population are less than 30 years of age. These are people we should feed them, we should meet their desires and aspirations. And while we do all these things, we also have to conserve nature so that the future generation takes advantage of that. And if you don't have a strong governance structure or a leadership structure, is it really possible to have all these beautiful words we have heard today come in place? I give you a very good example. From my own country, Uganda, And I hope the Museveni apologists at CIDA will not accuse me for this. One, Museveni is on record that, you know, if young Ugandans cannot work in the farm, let them go abroad. Because the money we get through remittances, or the money Uganda gets through remittances, is very sweet and very good. So it's basically encouraging Ugandans, young Ugandans, not to rely so much on rural activities or farming, and look at migrations and going out as an option to make the country's economy flourish. That is equally bad. I'm not going to talk about the women, because women farmers have complained a lot, and Museveni tells them straight, well, if you cannot compete with the men, and then you stay in the kitchen. He's on record, he said it. And this is a man who, when he went talking to the Swedes or to the European, is treated as a darling. He's the blue-eyed chap down there in Africa. But what it does when it comes to encouraging farming or young people to, you know, to continue agriculture as a way of enhancing their livelihoods, it does the opposite. So how are you going to meet this? Without a clear, democratic, and, you know, realistic political system, I think we are not going to make good impact. Let me put it cruelly that way.
Anyone have a comment and something to add? Yes, please.
Yeah. So we're talking about all these new opportunities, and I wanted to ask if, in this context, the opportunities to make this sustainable is also taken into consideration, and perhaps not do the same errors, some of the errors that we have done here developing.
The question was clear? You could follow?
Yeah.
So it's sustainability issue with respect to agripreneurship, sustainable development goals.
Yeah, I think it. Sorry, I'm still hooked in. I think it's completely correct. If we're trying to encourage the development of the term African agricultural renaissance has been coined, and that has to be with a long-term perspective, facing the challenges that we as people of this world face. And so if people are developing new businesses within agriculture and agribusiness, there has to be a long-term focus on that, not just in terms of the short-term economy, but also in terms of the long-term sustainability of the resources that you utilize. So, for example, one of the very large issues, I think, at the moment, and I'm sure you know far more about this than I do, is access to water resources. And so the idea that over the last decade, massive new underground water sources have been identified across Africa, and people have started exploiting these, which is completely understandable. But the problem is people are utilizing those underground water resources at a far higher rate than they're being replenished. And so in the long term, those businesses that are dependent upon those, and the livelihoods that are dependent on those, are not sustainable. So we need to be looking at the idea of circular economies. How can we best use and best see the opportunities in using less to do more, and utilizing not just the initial inputs that go into a food system, but what about the what comes out at the other end in terms of waste, food waste, creation of compost and fertilizers and so on, that we can actually utilize as business opportunities that can then be recycled back into the system.
So actually, as a quick follow-up there, when you talk as a NGO developing e-learning courses and all that, you focus mostly on developing agripreneurial or entrepreneurial skills. Is sustainability part of the package that you're going to offer online? Is that?
It has to be. There has to be. So what we're going to be looking at is the development of an e-learning course, about 6 modules, focused on skills needed within the topic of agribusiness, but within the cultural context of Africa. So very much an African developed program, supported by experts and organizations and universities on a global perspective. But added to that, bringing in some of the individual short inputs from people who are experts within their particular fields, whether that's packaging, recycling, energy usage, and so on, to basically inspire and create ideas.
Good. There's still room for questions. Of course, we can save all the questions for discussions later on around the table, but there's some more questions are possible. If not, it's about, we're running a little bit late, but we have plenty of time for the lunch, and there will be lunch served outside. And I want to urge you to be back here at 1:15 before we go for the roundtable discussions, so we explain what we will be doing then. Okay? Is there anything else that I'm forgetting right now? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, all the speakers. Yes, very much. Thank you so much.